Hello and welcome to the Angie Talk podcast. My name is Olubumi Olajide and thank you for joining us again on another Campfire episode. I do apologize for the length within the last one and this one. We are in the thick of planning for season 3 of the podcast and we have a lot of exciting announcements we're hoping to make in the next few weeks. So be sure to follow us on our Instagram and our Twitter pages to keep up to date with everything that's happening. But today, we're focusing on a story of a platform called Degrees of Change and the two wonderful people, Isha and Tanmay, that are building it. We're going to be learning from them about their motivation to start the platform and how they hope to build on it in the next few months and hopefully the years to come. I really enjoy this conversation and thank you, Tanmay and Isha, for joining me here. And let's start with introductions so we can learn a bit more about our two co-founders today.
So I just graduated a month ago now. I was studying civil engineering at University College London. I'm originally from Mumbai, but I moved to the UK for studies, and then I also spent a year in the US, which is where I met Tanmay. I am currently working in the Rocky Mountain Institute's India program, where I am supporting cities in low carbon transport. So I think it's really interesting because my background in civil engineering can really feed into energy, which I'm more interested in, you could say, and climate change, and that nexus really plays in because I work on transport particularly. So yeah, it's quite exciting. And at the side, I am the co-founder of Degrees of Change.
Yeah, so I'm from this place called Nasik in India, which is pretty close to where Isha is from. And I did my undergrad from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And that's where I met Isha in my last year of my undergrad. And now I will be a grad student, hopefully starting fall 2020. So once the USA situation eases up with international students, I think I will be on my way to do a master's in sustainability management. And I also am the co-founder of Degrees of Change with Isha. I think this was at the end of 2018. We were working on the same team for a competition called the Solar Decathlon Challenge by the United States Department of Energy. And we were both on the university's team to that challenge where we have to design a net zero building. And I was the project manager and she was the water team lead. So we met through working on that project. And then over the course of working with each other, we took a class together, and then we really enjoyed working with each other. And we really had a lot of similar things we wanted out of our experience. So we got along really well. And that's how we met.
So I think when we were studying together, we took this class on climate action planning, and then we would hang out a lot, and we realized that there's a lot of misconception, I would say, around climate change, but not just misconception, but also gaps in knowledge, especially in youth. Because personally, as a civil engineering student, I only learned sustainability through the civil engineer's lens. I never saw the economics of it. I never saw the policy aspects of it. And I never realized how much interplay there is. And at the same time, I think we wanted to see what India's part in tackling climate change could be, and how India could learn from the world, but at the same time, how also the world could learn from India. So I think that those are the two sides where we began from. But
yeah, another important aspect of why we started Degrees of Change is to bring interdisciplinarity to the table. Because when I was doing my undergrad degree, I think it took about 2 or 3 years for me to figure out what and where I wanted to kind of take my studies in. And I realized that every major had its own lens on climate change. Every discipline had its own thing to say about climate change, but very few were kind of tying it all up together. There was a lack of a platform, we felt at least in India, that looked at climate change through an interdisciplinary systems lens and in context of other fields, like Isha said, civil engineering, but in context of policy. And that's just one example off the top of my head. So we wanted to dedicate a platform that focused on climate change and address these misconceptions Isha was talking about through this specific lens. So that's how we had the idea for Degrees of Change. Well, actually, initially, it was a very casual conversation we had saying, hey, we care about these things and we want to do something on an Indian context. And the first pitch, I think of it, was the last time I saw her in college when one of us said, let's start a blog. And it was pitched as that. But then as we spoke about it over a year, like we spent a lot of time thinking about what we would like to do with it, we realized that it wasn't just a blog, but we had the chance to actually create a larger community and multiple platforms talking about these issues. So I guess a big initial objective for us was to represent the voice of the youth. But more than that, I would say it ties into a very core belief both Isha and I have, that we think the technology exists to solve and tackle climate change, at least to a large degree. But we feel that where it falls short is a lack of perspective. And youth like us often care about these issues. But when it comes to tackling them, I guess we are limited by what we know and limited by what we don't. So we thought that since it was so beneficial for us to look beyond our own perspectives and engage with other disciplines to get a better understanding of the issue, we thought that we would want to do the same for other people and hopefully inspire people, the students and young professionals, to take the climate lens into their own academic and professional lives, aside of personal, of course.
Did you catch what Tanmay just said right at the end there about wanting to help young people learn about issues relating to climate change? But there's this particular phrase that he used. It's we're limited by what we know and by what we don't know. And a lot of those things that we've been thinking about for season 3 is exactly this. How do we address the huge gaps in knowledge when it comes to talking about issues relating to climate change and energy for a younger audience that are really passionate about the topics, but they're limited by the amount of information that they have available to them, especially when they're from developing countries that don't have markets that are so developed that they don't have years and years of research to look back on. How do they relate to these global issues in a way that affects them and affects their local communities and affects their parents and their grandparents back home? And this issue of perspective and this issue of representing knowledge in a way that is more applicable to a wider audience, not just a Western audience, is something that I also asked Tanmay and Isha on. And the response was actually very interesting. I'd like to share that with you now.
That's a great question, actually. And we try to do that primarily with our articles, because each of our articles, we usually contact someone who we have worked with, who we know or who we know of, and then we speak with them. And in just over the course of a conversation with them, we find out where they're coming from and what they have to say. And we see if it matches with our approach that we just spoke about. And in this course of the conversation, we kind of evolve the idea or the thesis of the article, and we put it through our lens. And then there's plenty of research out there. So I guess in some capacity, the writer and Isha and me both work on it. And there's a lot of, it's a very iterative process. So there's a lot of going back and forth between the writer and the editors, and then polishing up an idea and finding the research for the narrative and looking at what larger story does anything tell. Because there's a lot of event-based coverage out there, like something will happen and then any news outlet or any research will tackle that specific event. But we feel there's very few that take these events and put them into context of a larger pattern. So we try to do that with each of our articles. And obviously getting in people from different fields, economics, policy, law, that does bring in a lot of fresh perspectives to the table to add to our own. And that's how we kind of hope to further this dialogue, at least.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I especially find that our the fact that all of us are youth and all of us belong to a certain demographic, and we bring our own perspectives, as Tanmay mentioned. I think it's also that we have our own networks, and the youth that we do reach, they have their own networks, and ultimately we are the ones that are going to have to grow up to this challenge, right? So I think in those terms, I feel that it's quite impactful to have to reach youth like us, because the more youth that understand this, the more youth that understand different perspectives, the more impact that we can have together as people who want to fight climate change.
Well, currently the biggest choke point we have is we're working online. So all of this was done over Zoom or WhatsApp or any other media like that. We had planned to meet for a month and just hang out and just do a bunch of degrees of change work, but that didn't happen because of the pandemic. But the current challenge, so because of the pandemic, we had to kind of reevaluate how we wanted to do things and kind of just work that everything up from scratch. So we're still in the process of that, and we're still getting used to the schedule that Degrees of Change puts us through, because Isha's working full time and I'm going to be a student soon. So whatever time we get outside of that is going to go mainly to Degrees of Change. So managing the time and balancing our own personal lives along with it is definitely going to be one challenge. And finding the right people, especially when we are not necessarily as connected because of the pandemic, is going to be another challenge. There's more which Isha can talk about too.
I think also one thing that we wanted to do for a while was we wanted to go to schools or other community events and talk about Degrees of Change, talk about our perspectives, and bring that to the larger audience. But I think that's kind of on the back seat now. In fact, Tanmay already had scheduled something with his school to start off, and then we were trying to build on that. I was going to approach my schools that I went to here. But, I think at the moment, there's so much adapting that we're having to do. Not necessarily all of it is bad, because it also means that we're getting used to the fact that we'll have to be working in 2 different continents soon enough. So I think in that sense, it's just a practice run for us.
Yeah. And another thing, which I guess is more of a thematic challenge, is getting things right, because we've not done this before. And this is our first time starting something like this. So you must have had that experience with the energy talk. Like you said, kind of bringing in structure to something that necessarily didn't have one before. And it started off as a very passionate, casual idea, but then we have to kind of give it more structure, make it fit within certain timeframes, work with other people. So giving that structure is a definite big challenge. And I think with adulting, we'll get better at that. So, yeah.
I think in terms of getting writers, initially it was just our closest friends that we approached, and then what happened miraculously was through our networks, their networks, we just started getting a lot more people interested in writing for us. For example, I have to thank you, Olu, because Sanjana Paul, who you interviewed a couple of months ago on your podcast, whose podcast I'd listened to a while back as well, she approached us saying that she was interested in writing for us, and she found out about us through your social media. So that's the kind of example I'm saying. There's so many people who really like what we're doing, and perhaps some of them really want to contribute, some of them don't have the bandwidth to, but they're still sharing what we do. They're still getting the word out, and that's helped us reach out to many people that I would not have imagined that ever really reaching out to otherwise.
And to build up on what Isha said, once we launched and put out a few articles, the initial response we got was so overwhelming that it picked up momentum, and that's definitely helping, along with the Energy Talk and you and Student Energy and a bunch of other people who support us. But in addition to that, I think the challenge will get a little easier in the future, because once Isha is more settled where she's working, and once I settle into my student life, then we get access to the networks that each of these places gives us. And both these places have the opportunity to connect us in 2 different continents with a variety of people from different backgrounds. So we think it's definitely challenging right now, but I see it getting a bit easier in the future.
Now, if you like what you hear about the Degrees of Change platform and you'd like to contribute by writing articles, you can reach out to Tanmay and Isha. I'll be leaving their information in the show notes of this episode, and also where you can go find the website. So if you're not interested in writing, you just want to read some of their well-presented, well-researched articles, you can head on over to the website. It'll also be in the show notes of the episode as well. And on a more practical note, I asked Tanmay and Isha how they're adjusting life to the global pandemic and how it's affected them personally, and what they hope to do in the next few months for themselves personally in their careers, and just the transitions that they have as young professionals in the energy and climate space. And also at the end, they tell you how to find them. But also, if you miss any of it, it'll also be in the show notes of this episode.
Yeah, I think it was quite a big transition for me, because I left the UK in the middle of my term, and I didn't really expect that I would probably not go back for a while. I didn't expect that I was going to graduate into the pandemic. And at that point, I didn't have a job. Things just kind of happened, just living one day at a time. But after I started working, things got really crazy because there were so many things I had to do at the same time. So time management has been a big challenge for me personally. And also because I've been with my family now for 4 months now, and I haven't really lived home for that long in the last 4 months at all. So, and I have to help out with chores at home. I have to, take care of my dogs, all those things. I have to manage those things as well. So there's been a lot of things going on, but I think I'm finally kind of getting the hang of it. And moving back to India as well, it's been quite frustrating to not be able to meet my friends and things like that. But I think that, I'm glad to be at home, and I'm glad that I'm lucky to have found a job in the middle of the pandemic and at a great place as well. So I think from my side, yeah, there are some challenges, but I'm still very lucky, and I'm very thankful.
In my case, I graduated last year, and then I came back to India, my home. And that's when I started applying to master's programs. And while doing that, I started doing Degrees of Change and the Student Energy Leaders Fellowship. So luckily for me, I guess my application process was done before the pandemic. So I just kept getting replies through the pandemic. I got my most recent reply 2 days ago, and I got into that place. So for me now, the challenge is to first pick what program and what place exactly I want to go, because I'm lucky to have some great options. And the bigger challenge is figuring out the unknown unknowns. And by that, I mean what the US government throws my way as an international student. So if the visa situation can improve, I can hopefully start this fall. But if not, then I guess I just have to be open to change and see where it takes me. Oh, yeah. You can find us on degreesofchange.in, degreesofchange.in. We are also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Please like, sub, the drill. And another thing we definitely want to put out to the world is that in this time, we are looking to expand, especially given the overwhelming response we've gotten. And we're a super small team of just 3 people right now. And between us, there's a lot of work and a lot of things which kind of just get lost while doing other stuff. So we're definitely looking to engage with more people, either as writers or to help out us on the back end with running this organization. So if anyone would like to reach out to us, even if it is to see how they could work with us, or even if it is just for a casual conversation, we would love that. We'd be down to chat anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us again on another Campfire episode. The best part about running this podcast is that I get to meet people like Tanmay and Isha on a regular basis, and I get to have great conversations about people being passionate about their work, and that's something that I really don't take for granted. And we can look forward to more Campfire episodes. Since we're in our off season, we don't really have like a schedule for when we actually do upload episodes, but we will try to keep it at least to a weekly basis from now on until we round off the Campfire series and we kick off season 3 in September. So we have a lot more conversations that are just as impactful and inspiring to come, and we hope you join us for that. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, to follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at The Energy Talk, and email us if you have any questions or feedback or anything else that you'd like to let us know. We're very open to feedback and we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us again, and a big shout out to Tanmay and Isha from Degrees of Change. You guys are awesome, and I look forward to working with you guys some more with your future projects. So thank you guys. I hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a lovely day.